Hello, everyone. My name is Carissa Brewster. I am the writer with Whitman Partners, and we are celebrating our 40 Fast and Future Leaders of Surgical Services for 2023. And one of our winners is Kayla Reece. Welcome, Kayla.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And can you tell us your position and facility?
Yeah, so I'm Kayla Reece. I'm the Senior Nursing Director for Perioperative and Interventional Services for the North Puget Sound. So I oversee 2 hospitals here in the Pacific Northwest, Providence Regional Medical Center in Everett, and also Swedish Edmonds campus. I think as a leader, I've been a leader well over 15 years. I think every time new challenges that present to you, that's what builds you and myself. Right. So every curveball that's ever been hit at me in my career are those things that I've learned the most from, the things we don't anticipate, the uptick in major increases with SSI. So when surgical site infections start going through the roof and you have to sit down and figure out really quick, why are we causing more harm than we promised the community we would cause? I think that's a big one. I think the other ones that have really stood out to me are when you hit a staffing crisis, when you have less and you're trying to do more. So how do you think innovatively? How do you think outside the box? COVID hit us hard, all of us as peri-op leaders. So it was really taking the time to navigate every situation that came up. And I felt like as soon as we came up with a really good, solid strategy, the next curveball hit us and we were like rethinking, and every single minute, it felt like there was a change at least once a week. I promise. And I think that is one of those things where you have to pull in all the right people, start having those conversations, and recognizing I didn't have to do it alone. I was surrounded by a bunch of really cool people who also had really good ideas. But that's where all my professional growth comes from, and seems to be the challenges that you have to figure out and come together as a team to really make sure you hit the nail on the head, because you get to the root cause, but you also stay in a place of flexibility and being agile all the time to knowing that this may not be the final solution. I stepped into this role having quite a bit of agency here at Providence Regional Medical Center here up in Everett. And I'll tell you now, right now in my CVL, I have almost 65% travelers. And so how do you fix these situations? How do you understand what's going on, and how do you recruit? And we're also in a market where it's a little more difficult because we're also unionized to recruit, because there's other hospitals right around us that have better contracts. So how do you do that? But I will say in perioperative services and CVL and our IR, our conversion rate for travelers is pretty great. So our team's got it figured out. We have a really amazing team. Once we get people into the door, our traveler conversion's pretty decent, but it's also how do we make sure we have a positive, uplifting team environment where people want to stay. And I think that's the piece that we're finding balance. I have figured out with our leaders, if I keep them in a place where they're happy and they're not burnout, they're sending the right message, they're engaged, they're out there rounding with the teams, they have their finger on the pulse, they know what's going on, they're vulnerable and they're transparent. And those are the 2 key things that I think is what sets us apart more than anything with our team, is that we're taking the time to share vulnerability and being transparent. As soon as we know something, we share it with our team. Like, hey, this is what's coming. How can we get ahead of this? And that's where we really leverage and engage and empower our team to be our think tank partners, because we know that the curveballs are coming. We know that these big challenges are going to hit. But when you have a staffing issue, how do you engage them? How do you keep them focused? How do you keep them prioritized all the time? And I think that's the biggest key. Nurses want to come in and take care of their patients. Techs want to come in and do their job. They don't want to hear about the challenges, but I'm held accountable to productivity. I'm held accountable to a budget. So how do I make that message relate to them is the key of engaging them in the work, right? They don't want to hear, my goal is to see another 1,000 patients year over year, another X amount. They want to know how they can be involved to do the work they come in to do. And my story to them is, how do we increase through efficiencies? How do we do better with throughput? And that is how we see 1 extra patient every single day. So it's focusing on, first case on time starts. It's focusing on turnover times. It's all those key things that really help us to tell the story, to help give our proceduralists and our surgeons more access to operating time and maximize their efficiency. So I think it's keeping them engaged and empowering them to be the right people to tell us what they think and how we can improve. And I feel we've done a really good job. We haven't had a big turnover since I've been here, right? I think it's easy to lure people to the Pacific Northwest. It's beautiful here. Well, I'll say this, it's beautiful here 9 months a year. It's not so much November, December, January. But I think the big thing is people who want to come to the Pacific Northwest want that balance sometimes between the mountains and the ocean. And it's easy to get them here. But once we have people who want to come here to see the location, it's making sure they have the right experience with the team. We have really amazing staff on our teams. Both hospitals that I oversee, one's a much more small community hospital. I'll be honest, we only have a couple travelers in our team because we don't have turnover there. And a lot of our longer tenured nurses have been here in our department from 25 to 50 years. I have a nurse in my PACU who's been here for 50 years in this organization. She is phenomenal.
Incredible.
Create these things, right? So it's, you see that people are dedicated to this community up here in Everett, and they're dedicated to Edmonds. And that's what I think that our travelers see when they come in. I mean, you're going to have the same environment everywhere, right? You have the same things coming in and out. We have gossip. We have all those little things that creates toxicity. But the thing is, if you keep people busy and you have less downtime to do all those negative things, you create this the minutia and the energy to keep people engaged and wanting to be involved. And that's done, through shared leadership and having people engaged with the staffing committee and how do they get to have a say in how we do our staffing matrix. And I think that's where people are like, wait, I have a voice. I have the ability to lead and do something different. And that's what's exciting, is that engagement from our leadership team. And a lot of us have lean backgrounds. That's the cool piece, is where when you come from lean, it's the two pillars, having the right processes and having the right people. And I also hold myself and our leadership team really accountable. And that's another piece. We're all held up to the same standards and accountability of our core values. And that's what I feel keeps people engaged. If you know what's expected of you, you can deliver. Right. I will tell you, the big thing that is consistent for me is positivity. I try to find the good in everything. And I have a pretty open door policy. I have almost 600 people who report up through me. And a big thing that my admins will tell you is I will cancel a meeting to meet with a caregiver. And I think my caregivers are more important than anything. And when they bring me a problem, they normally 99% of the time have the solution and the answer. So that's the cool part, right? And it's engaging them. But I have staff who will reach out to me and say, "Hey, I have this really cool idea," and that comes from just creating rapport, being out there, being present. I wear scrubs most of the time. I'm in dress clothes, but I like to put on scrubs and tennis shoes and just go out and round in the unit, see what's going on, let people ask me questions. And I just don't hesitate to be honest, be raw, and be vulnerable, because I don't have all the answers either. I've been here 6 months. I've been in healthcare for 20 years now. So I just want them to feel that it's natural to have a conversation. Come to me, ask me those tough questions. What's keeping you up at night? And so I guess that's my secret sauce, is just transparency and being present between two hospitals 5 days a week. There's days where I'm a half day at each site. There's days where I have to leave because something unexpected happened in the OR and it's time to debrief or wrap my arms around my leaders. My leaders take a lot. So then how do I wrap my arms around them and just say, "Hey, it's okay, come vent to me"? But they show up every single day. And how do we celebrate that? And we do a lot of celebrations. That's a big piece for me, is to keep people engaged and celebrate not only their profession, but through their professional weeks and calling them out, but how do we take the time to send an email that says, "Hey, I don't know what we did yesterday, but amazing job." And that's where I like to celebrate people. That gossip, the toxicity, letting rumors fly really fast. If you don't get ahead of it, it's in this day and age, it's going to fly really, really quick. So I think that's the biggest piece, right? Is as soon as we hear something, it's getting ahead of it and it's shutting it down fast. I don't like to let rumors fly. I don't like to let gossip continue on. I typically am a person that's pretty quick to holding my leaders accountable to just jumping ahead of it also. We have a really big caregiver relations team that'll help us with anything we have going on. So you're not reaching out to just your HR business partner every single day. It's, hey, we're going to hold you accountable. You can't say these things at work. It doesn't align with this. So when you start holding people accountable, that word travels fast too, because people don't like being in trouble. So I think that's the big piece. And when I came in, I was really honest with our caregivers to let them know, this is my strategic, this is my plan, this is what I'll tolerate, and this is what I won't. And so if you have a question, come to me. And I do appreciate when people are like, hey, there's a rumor going on, I'm coming straight to you from because you're the source, right? And I'm like, okay, let's get this under control. And the docs do it too. It's really fast. They're fast to come into my office and be like, do you have a minute? And then they sit down because I have snacks on my desk. And so they will just sit down and just start talking. They're like, I'm hearing this. Is this true? And I'm like, yeah, this is true. Or they came to me about staffing issues and they're like, I have concerns with X, Y, and Z. And they're really good collaborative partners to help put out the fires, to help stop the gossip from brewing. I love that they're strategic in that way also. So how do you leverage those relationships as you build them, not only with your staff, but also with your docs, to saying, hey, I'm your source of truth. If I'm not the right person, then go to one of my leaders and ask them. But I think that's the biggest piece, is just asking people to bring forward their issues, concerns, and let's put it to rest if it's not true. Well, artificial intelligence is amazing. I'm going to say that. But it's only as great as the people that know how to challenge it, as know how to build it, and know how to understand how it works, right? So in my previous position, which is another hospital here in the Pacific Northwest, I used a data platform that was built with AI built in and integrated. It was amazing. And I wish that I had it I wish every leader had access to this, because it was powerful. And it was the time I was there and I got to use this data for the last, I don't know, 4 years. It was developed up from an anesthesiologist here in the Pacific Northwest who worked with me. And so I was able to look at control charts, not trends. You can look at trends all day long, but when you have control charts and you can really understand what's going on, you're going in the right direction, right? When you're starting to move the needle. And I always had this gut issue, and I used to do pediatrics. And so you don't want to cause harm to kiddos, but we would always have tonsils and adenoids would be readmitted right around day 5. And we really started looking at that and what was going on. We had one of our surgeons who was willing and vulnerable enough to look at his data through this platform and share his results with the entire organization. And he came to a place where he was able to say, hey, this is how many tonsils and adenoids I've done. This is how many our group has done. And when you looked at it, we were under benchmark for readmissions. National benchmark is like less than 2% of your patient population. But when he broke it down and looked at it, not only by race, he took the time to take it down one step further, and by language. When patients identified as Caucasian, his rates were really low. And then when we started looking at it, if you identified as Black, then you were already statistically 50% higher than our Caucasian patients. If you identified as Asian, it was significantly higher. So then when we started looking at everything based off of language, our Vietnamese population was blown out of the water. That there was such a statistical significance that shown, if you were to come into our surgery center and have your tonsils and adenoids taken out, that there was a higher incidence, if you were Vietnamese speaking, that your kiddo was going to end up back in our emergency room, possibly in our OR. And so we knew as a team, for a post-op readmission, we needed to get ahead of this. We needed to do something. So we put together what's called a rapid process improvement workshop, an RPIW. Our team was filled with 2 surgeons. They gave up an 8-hour block. Sorry, not an 8-day, an 8-hour block of their time. It was their ARNPs, Some of our MA supervisor was there from our clinic, 2 of our nurses from the PACU, myself, and also our nurse manager of the unit. We all sat in a room and just started talking. And it was really interesting what we came up with because we all pulled literature and we started looking at what are our opportunities. And it became really easy for us. Quick, we figured out hydration is the key, right, for preventing post-op readmissions for tonsils. So the key was to keeping those tonsil beds wet. And so as we started looking at this, how could we encourage hydration? That was the biggest piece. So we shared a document that had no words on it. It was all pictures. And based off the kiddo's weight, we were able to color in and circle what the goal for every patient was when they leave our PACU, and how much for the next 7 days, how many glasses of water they needed to drink at home to avoid the risk of coming back for a post-op rebleed. And so once we started implementing this tool, and this tool came from literally all the nurses sitting in the room and everyone talking with the docs and the MAs, and we started this in the clinic before we even had the surgery happen. It didn't take us long to figure out that was the secret sauce. By using pictures and not words and changing, because we were now still using interpreters. Interpreters were coming in, but then we made it fun. So you could go home and you could have your kiddo color in if they were old enough as they drank a glass of water throughout the day. And when I left and presented there, I presented at a national conference about this last year. It was so amazing because we had not had a post-op rebleed in 6 months. We figured it out. So here we had so many, we had 0. So we knew we figured out by changing it from so many pieces, so many words and so many documents we were handing to families. We were getting lost in translation what the powerful piece was. It was just focusing on hydration. And we knew it didn't matter what we told them to eat or drink. Drink your drink of choice, eat your food of choice. We were trying to overcomplicate post-op care. We should never have even overcomplicated. That's the key, is when you have AI built in and you know the statistical significance and you're going somewhere with this, you can move the needle. And we moved it really far. I don't have that here at my fingertips yet at Providence and Providence Swedish, but I'm hopeful I will. Number 1. Number 2, we just partnered with Lean Toss for schedule integration. They have AI built in, which is really exciting. This will empower our surgeons and their offices to be able to release block, which we know is a beautiful resource that needs to be managed very well. Otherwise, you use it or lose it. We talk about it all the time on all the platforms. And that's the biggest piece, is Lean Toss will now empower all of those clinics and schedulers to say, hey, we're not utilizing this time. If we release it now, it's not counted against us. And that creates the ability for us to either change our staffing model and or allow opportunities for other groups to be able to pick up that block, especially for robotic time. We have 2 robots here that are allocated 100%. So how do we then share that very valuable resource with other docs who may need it for their patients who, have cancer or whatever we can do? So I think that's the piece. It's underutilized. It's never going to replace any of us clinicians, but I'm very passionate about data. So how do we get people who are excited about data, the right data at their fingertips, and be able to trust that it's correct, number 1. But how do we empower them to have more knowledge at their fingertips to say, hey, if we do this, this will be a better outcome for our teams, and we're utilizing all of those spaces right. But it's also the clinical side, right? So how do we anticipate SSIs? How do we know, like, something's ticking here, we need to do better? I think that's where we can try and control preventable harm. I live in the Pacific Northwest where Microsoft's hub is, where Google's here, and we have all these people. How do we not use this so much better? And that's the biggest piece that I would love to see integrated more into healthcare, is around building a solid leadership team and going back to basics with our staff. So how do you do that? How do you take the time to make sure people aren't burnt out? I think resilience is a topic that we all talk about, and also being servant leaders, but we forget to take care of ourselves. And I think that's where we need to start, is taking care of ourselves, taking care of our leaders, so it translates into taking care of our team, maximizing our throughput, figuring out like pretty much best ways to create those partnerships and control our costs. And that seems to be what's working really well for us here, but I'm not there yet. I mean, I was hired to come in here and recover the lost volumes that we had seen over the last year and a half, really grow and figure out new opportunities with, different docs, and what other opportunities can we explore to creating, more programs, and figuring out, well, that comes at a cost. That's equipment sometimes. Those are new robots. So it's really trying to figure out and balance your priorities, being strategic and being fiscally responsible. So sometimes you have to go back and take away something. We know how much a minute in an OR costs at each of our facilities. So sometimes you have to do what's not popular and close an OR. Being here for 6 months, everyone's been really honest, transparent. They've been vulnerable with me. And I think the biggest piece for me to gain are more or less the seasoned staff.
Mm.
The people who've been here and they've had to drink the different Kool-Aids throughout the years, throughout their careers, every time a new boss comes in and they have new ideas. And I tried to tell the why behind my changes. And I think when I can connect the dots that, hey, this is going to change because I build respect and rapport. They may not love my answer. They may not. And that's okay. But if I help them understand the why behind my decision, then they tend to get on board. And I think that's the biggest piece of change with a new leader. The surgeons, they'll come to me and chat with me. They come to figure out and advocate for their staff when their staff's coming to them saying, hey, Kayla wants to make this change. Don't let her. And it happens. It's happened here in the last few weeks, and I'm honest about it. And it's one of those conversations where I remind people what our requirements are to meet, state requirements of being a level 2 trauma center. I really, when I make a decision, I really don't care where we do X. I'm not that firm in a decision. I want to provide safe patient care. But the reason I've made this decision is because of this. Then people tend to calm down and take a breath. But otherwise they get all so nervous because I'm making a major change. I'm like, hey guys, a room's a room. I'm like, a decision to change something is just a simple decision, but I welcome being challenged. I'm not going to lie to you. Like sometimes they have a better idea and I'm like, okay. And you're humble enough. I am at least humble enough to say, okay, I hear you. Your concerns make total sense. I'll pause on that right now. Let's continue to think through this as a team and we'll get to a better outcome or solution that works for all of us. And that's where I have to come a place I have to come from, but where there's going to be decisions I have to make where I can't just always come to them and make that decision. But if I help them understand the why,
Mm-hmm.
I tend to be in a better place. And I ask my boss for the same thing. When my boss asks me for something, I'm like, if you tell me why, I then can help you understand if I can get this done as fast as you want it. And if not, then we can figure out where the balance is. And sometimes it's really simple and I can get it done with no issues. But then there's other things that are really time consuming. And unfortunately, our calendars are filled typically 2 to 3 weeks out. So finding time it's critical. But I also don't want to let anyone down. And I know my boss, when they come, or all bosses, when they come to me, they need something for a reason. Typically their bosses.
Yeah.
It's always like, okay, let me figure out how to make time for you. But what are you trying to gain from this? That helps me. Because ultimately I too want to grow, right? I want to eventually end up as, a COO or a CAO.
Kayla, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a great interview. I love talking to you.